What's up, guys? Brian here from Bright Guy Garage, and it's been a bit, and we're gonna start taking a look at the Olds 403 here from the 79 Trans Am. Let me get you up to speed. Last you guys saw this 403 was in the 79 Trans Am Part 2 video when I was pulling it out of the Trans Am and getting it in here in the garage on the stand. So if you guys haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to go back and watch that. At least the very end of the video. It'll get you more familiar with this exact engine. Gave it a real close once over with you guys just to see what I was working with and the things that I found in the process of buying the Trans Am and pulling the engine out. So yeah, if you guys want to learn more about the car and the engine, watch those last two videos. But I'll try to catch you up to speed real quick. It's a 403. It's an early 80s California Oldsmobile scene build. And according to my receipts and everything, it's pretty much exactly the same as it's been, as it was set up in the early 80s. So this is kind of like an early 80s Oldsmobile scene out in California time capsule of the 403. So I'm really excited to see what's in there and to confirm that it is actually the same setup. Because there's bound to be a lot of things here that some guys probably haven't seen in a while. So very excited about that. Compared to the last time you guys saw this, really not much has changed. I took the valve cover bolts out. I took some accessories and pulleys off, the fuel lines, exhaust manifolds, spark plugs, small stuff. So I'm left with the bulk of what needs to be removed. I didn't do that without you guys. So without saying much more, let's jump into it. All right, so let's start here with taking the valve cover off. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I may have peeked in here once or twice already. So let's take a look. Get that out of here. And right off the bat, you can see some goodies. So we got what looks like an adjustable rocker arm kit, guide plates, head studs instead of head bolts, aftermarket springs and retainers. We got some good stuff going on in here. So as I said, I took a peek in here once or twice already because as stated in some other videos, I'm a Chevy guy. All this old stuff is new to me, especially from this era, the early 80s. This is before I was born, so this is all new to me. So I snapped some pictures and talked to some olds guys and actually got some pretty good information about what I found here. A lot of people said they haven't seen this in quite some time, and some of them are even still running this from old setups just like this one. So what I have here is an adjustable rocker arm kit from a gentleman named Dave Smith. Dave Smith was well known in the Oldsmobile community out in California because he ran an Olds-powered Pro Stock car. And he also ran a machine shop called Precision Speed. And lo and behold, I looked through my receipts and I found parts receipts for the rocker arm kit from Precision Speed. And also the entire engine build, the machining, any work done to the heads, the crank, everything that was done to create this setup was done in-house right there at Precision Speed. So right away, we're only in with the valve covers off, looking at the valve train, and I'm already finding some cool stuff. So I'm super excited to see what else I'm gonna find in here. So let's keep digging. With the valve covers off, now I got my eyes on this pretty old Holly Street Dominator intake manifold, which seems to be held in with a variety of fasteners. 12-point, 6-point, we got a stud back there. I don't know if that was for any tactical reason or just whatever fits, but let's go ahead and get that off. Now I can start taking the intake manifold bolts out, and I'm going to start with the 12-point head fasteners. I'm just going to loosen all of them up, break each of them free, and I'm going to leave them in their respective mounting holes for right now. I'll show you why in a moment. So I went ahead and loosened up the remainder of the intake manifold bolts here on the right bank of the engine. So now with all of the bolts loosened up, we can go ahead and start pulling them out. Now, a really good practice to have when you're doing something like this is to pay attention while you're removing the bolts, because they may be varying lengths. and that may be for a specific reason. In this case, if you look here towards the front of the manifold, this mounting location here on this first hole up here is higher than the second one here. This one sits much lower in between the runners. So if we take these bolts out and take a look, you can almost bet, yep, front bolt is longer than the second one. It's got more distance to cover due to the mounting point being higher. So anytime you do something like this, it's good to take note of how long the bolts are and where they came from to make sure that they go back in the right spot. I'm actually pretty surprised to see that that's not stuck on there. I was ready to just lift right off. Well, I wasn't ready for that. Well, what do we have here? It's like a intake manifold gasket and almost like a valley cover all in one. Never seen this before. Felpro. 96039. I wonder if they still make this. Never seen this. Huh. Interesting. But more importantly, moment of truth. What do we got? What do we have? Hydraulic lifters. Okay, so it is a hydraulic setup that's in here. It is not a solid setup. Interesting, interesting. Okay, what else we got? Oh boy, we got these gaskets. That was barely on there. I've heard nothing but bad things about these. Usually they end up leaking. Oh, and here's a good example of why. Lovely. On the Chevys at least, always run a bead of RTV. Never use these. There will definitely be plenty of cleaning in order. Somebody went a little RTV crazy on everything, it looks like. Cooling jackets look pretty crusty. Pretty typical. Okay. Looks pretty nice in the valley here, not bad. Got a little peek of the camshaft. From what I can see, I like what I'm seeing. Doesn't look chewed up or too badly worn from what I can see at least, which isn't much. All right, let's keep going. So I'm itching to get the heads off, so I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling these rocker arms off next. So with all those nuts removed, I can go ahead and start pulling off these rocker arms. I have a organizer that I'm going to be putting them in, so I know exactly the position that they came off in. So later, when I'm doing an inspection, if there's an issue with any cylinder or any valve, I can take a look at every piece that was working specifically with that cylinder or valve and see if there's anything contributing to the issue or any further signs of wear. So keeping these all in order. So go ahead and start taking these off now. So with the rocker arms removed, we can come in and take a closer look at the head here. And we can see the guide plates and the screw-in type rocker arm studs, as well as the head bolts that were studded out. It's a nice touch. All springs. Pulling the push rods out next. Check on those. And as I mentioned, putting the rocker arms in an organizer. That's all I mean. Took 15 minutes. I'm not gonna buy a fancy one. That'll do the job. Close it up, it'll get put where it's gonna stay until I inspect and clean them and they go back on. So that'll work just fine. All right, so as far as taking out the push rods and organizing them, it's very much the same. Just have a box here. Ooh, what do we have here? Oh, there's my lifter box. All right, we'll keep that to the side because that will be getting used to keep the lifters organized. Anyway, just a nice simple cardboard box. Give yourself orientation marks. Front, got the driver's side cylinders here, passenger side cylinders over there. Just number them. I labeled the intake and exhaust valves for each one. I used this on a small block Chevy quite a few times, so I ended up having to write down ones for this small block Olds because the intake and exhaust valves on the very ends are flipped. But anyway, super easy. Just punch a hole in them with a screwdriver, and then out the push rod comes, and in it goes. That's it. I could have used a deeper box for this, but this will work. Again, they're going somewhere safe, so I don't have to worry about them. And if you use too deep a box, like if I were to go in from here, then they'll just fall right in. Even if you keep them snug, tends to loosen up. Don't ask me how I know. So before I put everything away into storage here, I'm just going to show you something that I'm most likely going to be doing off camera. Because really I'm just focused on disassembly right now, and then I'll do cleaning and then inspection of all my parts. But when I go to inspect the push rods, after I clean them out, we're going to blow out the holes on each side, make sure there's no obstructions in there, otherwise that could restrict oil flow. But what you're going to want to do is also check to make sure that the push rods are straight and not bent. So you can do this either with a machinist straight edge or a surface that you know is nice and flat. Now I won't be doing it on this table because it's a little warped, but just for the sake of showing you guys here, you're gonna take your push rod and lay it down on the flat surface, and you're just gonna roll it. Just give it a roll back and forth. And if it is bent in any way, you're gonna know immediately. It is not gonna roll nice and smooth like that. It's gonna, you'll know is what it's not gonna roll nice is what I'm trying to say. So these are all boxed up and labeled, rocker arms here on the bottom, and the push rods I put inside a bigger box so the part of the push rod that was sticking out is protected, even though these shouldn't get touched in any way until I come back for them. But again, can't stress this enough. If you're gonna be reusing valve train parts, keep them in order. Okay, so now we can finally go ahead and start pulling the nuts off of the head studs and get the head off. So I'll grab my impact and we'll get at it. So here are the nuts off of the head studs. As you can see, each one had a washer underneath the nut, and I actually had one stud back out on me while I was removing it. So I'll address that later, not a big deal. If we take a look back here, I have one nut still on the very center stud, and I have that like that on each side. I'm gonna leave that in place while I take a pry bar. I'm gonna pry most likely right here. It's usually an easy spot to get some leverage underneath the head. Make sure that the head raises up freely off of the dowel pin and that they're not stuck. I don't anticipate any issues with this block because it's in pretty good condition. Usually only run into that with a block that's been sealed up for a long time or sitting in the elements or something like that. But you want to keep a nut or a bolt somewhere in the head a few turns, just so when you pry it up and it does finally pop free, it's not just gonna pop free, surprise you, and fall on the floor. Okay, so I got my pry bar. We're just gonna sneak it right under here, the corner of the head, and we'll use it up against the block here for some leverage. So we'll just get under there. And as you can see, that wiggles nice. So now we'll just check the front. Do the same thing on the front here. As you can see, that moves freely. So I'll do the same thing on the other side just to make sure the other side's free. And then I'll pull the center nut out and we'll go ahead and lift the cylinder heads off. All right, so as we checked already, these should be relatively free. Go ahead and pull this straight up off of the studs. There we go. There goes the head gasket. Oh, it looks pretty nice in here. All right, we'll set this aside. And with that, go ahead and get the other side off. Okay. All right, let's take a closer look. All right, so first I'm just looking at the tops of the pistons here. and they look pretty good. Doesn't seem to be any markings or anything like that where a valve may have come in contact with the piston top. Looks like we got normal carbon deposits, carbon buildup. Look at the cylinder walls. See a little line right there, but fingernail's not getting caught on it, so that's good. Typical ridge here towards the top of the cylinder where the piston actually doesn't stroke up to all the way. That's normal. Looks like we got a standard head gasket in here, not a steel shim. Wonder if I can get a little bump of compression with steel shim. Have to do measurements for that. And here on the other side, looks like pretty much the same. Maybe a little more carbon buildup on this side. Have to look into that. And again, just pretty standard glazing of the cylinders. All right, looking good. So let's look at the heads. Okay, so here's the head from the driver's side. It should be said that you can't really 100% confirm whether or not a head is good without bringing it to a machine shop and having the proper testing done. There could very well be small cracks in the head itself that can't be seen with your eye, but I'm just gonna real quick look over both these cylinder heads and just look for anything that might be jumping out at me here. But from what I can see, everything looks pretty normal in your usual wear. No cracks that I can see on the head or in between each combustion chamber. The combustion chambers themselves look like they have normal carbon deposits. Cylinder 3 here looks a little more wet than the others. Let's go take a look after I trip over that box. That was from my glove before. Looked like it might be a little bit thicker on that one. Take note of that. Cylinder 3, could be rings, could be seals. All right. And over here, again, pretty usual. Don't see anything jumping out at me. It doesn't appear that any of the valves have come in contact with any pistons, as I said earlier. No gouges, no scratches in the mating surfaces. So from what I can just see with my eyes real quick while they're still dirty, they look pretty good. So I'll leave the heads aside here for now until I come back to them and disassemble everything, and then I can really get a closer look at the remaining things that need to be inspected. The springs, the retainers, the valve seats, valve guides, the valves themselves, and so on. There's a few things to be looked at, but we'll come back to that. And this is really just a note to myself here with 8507 PT for the head gaskets. All right, noted. So quick and dirty initial inspection of the block, the heads, and the head gaskets complete. So let's continue on. Now we have the absolutely thrilling task of removing all 9,384 head studs. And to do that, we're going to take 2 of the nuts that were on the studs previously, holding the head down. And we're just going to start to thread that first one there. Man, I could go for a sandwich. All right, thread that down. We'll take the second nut. Go on top of that one. Thread that down. Get them to where they're touching. I'll take one wrench and go on the bottom nut, and then another wrench on the top. And we're just going to tighten these together. Kind of like a jam nut. And now with them both tightened together, I'm going to take a wrench and go on the bottom nut and loosen the stud out. Oh, that one was really in there. Whoop. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm definitely going to want to run a thread chase through these after they're all out. All right, so now I got this to the point where it's loose enough to turn by hand. So before I actually remove all of this with the stud, I'm going to put this wrench back on the bottom nut. I'm going to cheat here and use my impact, which I should have done before. And I'm just going to break those two nuts free. Top nut is removed. I'll hold the stud. Get that second nut out of there. And now I can just loosen the stud, and out she comes. So just to reiterate something I said earlier with always checking your fastener sizes, if we take a look here at the head studs that are still remaining in the bottom row here, you can see that the three center ones are the same size, but the ones here in the end are shorter. All the ones on the top were the same size as these three. So when this goes back together, the shorter head studs go on the bottom row on each end. So it's an eternity later, and all the head studs are removed, and I have them bagged up. So now we can go ahead and start working on the water pump, the pulleys, front timing cover, and the fuel pump. Up next is going to be pulling off the water pump, and it's got a mix of some smaller bolts and some larger ones. The smaller ones you can see here, 1 and 2, and then down low there's 2 more, 3 and 4, and then the remaining stud and a nut, bolt, stud and a nut, and another bolt. All the other fasteners are removed from the water pump with the exception of the 2 remaining studs, and it seems like these studs backed out. Yep, not a big deal, could fix that later. Get this last one over here, which, yep, is longer. This one is longer than the one that goes in this side. Yep, here she comes. Oh, yummy. Oh my God. Look at this. Jeez. I wonder why it wasn't cooling well. I mean, I guess it was working to some extent, but my God, what was the coolant like? Oh boy, this block's gonna need a lot of cleaning. I'm gonna turn my attention here to the balancer, or the crank pulley. Yeah, there we go. All right, let's work on getting this balancer off. With the balancer removed, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the remaining 4 bolts down here that are holding the timing cover in place. On the top right here, you can see we have this stud and a nut that appears to be holding the timing pointer in place. And then the remaining 3 are 12-point head bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by removing this one over here. With all the bolts removed from the timing cover, go ahead and start looking at separating that. And judging by the amount of RTV that I see, I'm gonna have to give it a little tap. So there are actually these 2 alignment pins that the cover is gonna have to get over, but it seems to have a little bit of resistance. I don't want to pull it, I definitely don't want to bend it. This whole two-piece situation here seems like it's just asking for leaks. So I'm gonna back off these front oil pan bolts about a turn or so. See if maybe that gives me a little space. I'm just gonna keep going around little by little here. There we go. Oh, they're just held on by the seal. So here's the two-piece timing cover. If we look on the bottom half here, we can see this lip right here, and that kind of butts up against the top half like that, which is definitely interesting to me. If you look, you can see RTV ran across this bottom edge here. That would seem like an area that would be very prone to leaking. So, I don't know, I'm no engineer. And if we take a look here, see the timing cover seal that goes around the nose of the crank, which actually looks pretty good, but that's definitely going to get replaced either way. And what's left of the seal down here that goes around the bottom of the cover up to the oil pan. And there is just gobs of RTV all over this thing. Speaking of interesting, notice a few different things here under the front timing cover. And first off, we got the fuel pump arm here that rides off of this on the front of the cam, as opposed to a small block Chevy that's got a push rod that goes to the inside of the block and runs off of a cam lobe. So that's interesting. Next, we're gonna pull out the fuel pump. And in order to do that, we're gonna get this arm to the lowest point of the cam here, which I actually just snuck past because I'm not familiar with this setup. As I mentioned, with small block Chevys having the push rod setup that I'm familiar with. So I just want to give this a rotation and just take a look. See it lifting up the arm there. Actually hear the pump working as well. Interesting. I'm also seeing a bit of timing chain slack there. I gotta check that in a second. All right, so lowest part of the cam. It looks about right there, I would say. And as far as timing chain goes, oh my God. Yeah, I'd say that there's a little bit of timing chain slack. Now looking at the fuel pump, on the top here, it looks like we got a stud with a nut. And on the bottom, we got another 12 point. Already got the nut off on the top. Take that bolt out, it's got a washer on it. And my socket head. All right. Break that seal loose. And out it comes. Looks pretty much the same as how a mechanical fuel pump works on a small block Chevy. It's just being operated by this arm instead of the push rod. It's cool. Now I get this timing set off. Take this off as well. It's got a locating tab on it for when it goes back in. All right. There we go. That dropped. Go ahead completely off. So with the cam sprocket and the chain removed, you can go ahead and get the crank sprocket off of here now. I have the 3-jaw pullers set up. Make sure that each jaw is behind the sprocket and not actually grabbing onto any teeth. It's an easy way to break the teeth off if you're not careful. So out she comes. So taking a closer look at the gears here from the timing set, we can look at the lower gear, which is for the crank, and we can see that it has one single keyway. So this is a non-adjustable timing set. You may have seen adjustable timing sets. They have multiple keyways, and that will allow you to physically and mechanically alter the timing, advance or retard the timing of the setup, just based on how you install this lower crank gear. Now this one, as I said, is non-adjustable, so it can only go on one way onto that one single keyway. And we can see the alignment marks here on the front. Got the dot there on the lower gear and the dot there on the upper gear. So all the marks are there for me. I don't need to take note of anything else. So this is a flat tappet camshaft in this block. And when a flat tappet cam is installed, it gets broken in with the lifters. So each cam lobe and lifter is broken in together. So think of them as a forever pair, basically. So what that means is once I remove these lifters, I need to make sure that I organize them and note their position so that I can reinstall them in the exact same position. If I fail to do this and I mix them up, that can just lead to really excessive wear and cam failure. So for this block, I'm planning on reusing the cam. So that means I need to take this necessary step with the lifters. However, for all I know, I can pull the cam out and it could be excessively worn. But for right now, I'm moving forward with anticipating reusing that camshaft. So I'm going to go ahead now and pull out all these lifters and organize them here in this lifter box, old box that I have from an old camshaft kit. And that'll keep everything nice and organized. Just have it labeled to the front and which cylinder each one is on. So as long as I work left to right, these should go in and come back out and go back in the engine the exact same way. So let's go ahead and take those out. So removing the lifter is a fairly simple task. What I have here is just a magnetic tool. All I'm going to do is just go down to the lifter bore a little bit here and grab onto the lifter and just pull it straight up and out. I'll take a quick look here at the face of the lifter, and what I'm seeing there is just a normal bit of wear. That actually looks pretty good. There's some more tests that I'm going to have to do to further inspect it. So just putting a straight edge on it and making sure that it hasn't become basically ground in like a divot. But for now, I'm just going to pull these out, organize them, and they'll all get cleaned up and inspected at a later time. I just removed the last oil pan bolts and are ready to break this free and lift it out. This certainly looks like an aftermarket pan. Just looking at this gold color on here doesn't look like it was spray painted on. Just see if I can find any stamping or writing on it. Anyway. Ooh, there's a lot of crud in that pickup. All right, let me get you in here. All right, so that gold color definitely was not spray painted on. Wonder what kind of pan this is. Ooh, look at this. Oh boy. Ooh, there's some decent sized pieces of crud in there. Oh boy. So here's all that shine that we were seeing up from the front. And I've seen main cap girdles before that are connected from main to main on the sides here, but not like these. They're just a block. I wonder what purpose that serves. I'm gonna have to look that up and see what these would do, because I know the girdle obviously connects them all together on each end and has the rails down the side, and that helps you with any flexing, but I don't really know how much more this would do. I'll have to check that out. Anywho, you can see here that it was definitely machined and balanced. Nice, nice. Check this out too. Definitely some gunk in there. Looks like a melling pump of some kind. Okay. Well, I was thinking everything was pretty clean. I was looking at the top end, but now that I'm seeing this and what I saw in there, I'm getting a little worried. I was anticipating quite a bit of bearing wear just because of how much it vibrated. And if it's really that out of balance, I expect that it took a toll on the bearings, but only one way to find out. We got to get in there. So I'm actually having a little bit of trouble removing some of these lifters. I still have 6 out of the 16 lifters in the block. What's happening here is that these are actually stuck. So I've made some progress on these 2 ones in the front here. But what commonly happens is the lower part of the lifters don't actually enter the lifter board. So you can get some buildup of crud or varnish towards the bottom of the lifter, and then it will prevent it from actually sliding out through the bore easily, at least out through the top. As we can see here, I grab onto it and it gets stuck right about there, and then I can't pull it out any further. So the issue with that right now is, push that back down on the cam journal. If I want to remove the cam, I have to get all the lifters out, because that lifter resting down on the cam lobe is basically causing the journal behind it to hit the lifter, so I'm not able to pull the camshaft out. So I have to get these lifters out somehow. I could rotate the block upside down just so these lifters hang down and away from the cam, and then I can pull the camshaft out, but then I still need to get the lifters out afterwards. And if I turn the block right side up, once the camshaft is out, these are all gonna just fall into the block. And not only do I not want them banging around, but I don't want to lose their positioning. So what I'm actually going to do is just get them from up top here. I'm going to use probably a pair of channel locks or vice grips and just lock onto them and try and tap them out. I've already tried PB Blaster and B12 Chem Tool around the lifters and down the bore, and it didn't seem to free anything up. So I'm going to do it this way. Let's see what we get. I have my favorite pair of trusty vice grips here, and I definitely want this to grab on tight because I don't want this sliding up the lifter as I tap on it, because I don't want to completely ruin the surface of the lifter, but I don't want it so tight that I might leave jaw marks. So I'm just gonna get that on there snug. As you can see, I didn't go Incredible Hulk trying to get that on. There we go. Not too bad from just an initial visual inspection. All right, so I'll start getting the rest out. So here I was just a moment ago thinking that I was going to keep this clip out of the video because I already showed you how I removed the one lifter, and probably wouldn't be too entertaining to watch me remove all the rest of them. Probably take a while too, but my God, let's look at this. Can you tell how concave that is? Look at that. This lifter is toast. You could see some of the buildup around the circumference here from how badly it was getting worn. So that was probably catching in the lifter bore as well. My God, that one's beat to all hell. And that was cylinder 3, the exhaust, for the exhaust valve. So when we pull the cam out, I'm willing to bet that lobe on the cam is not going to look so hot. I have all the lifters out except for 2. I still have one here on the number 2 cylinder and another one back there on the number 8. They're actually giving me quite a bit of trouble trying to get them out. And after seeing that last lifter that I just pulled out and how badly beat up the bottom of it was, I really don't want to go trying to force these lifters up and out of the bore, just in case they are just as beat up on the bottom. I don't want to scratch up the bore trying to pull them out through the top. So they're stuck where they are now, and it's up off the cam, so I should be able to actually... Yep, the cam is moving. So I should be able to pull the cam out all the way now, and then after the cam is out, I'll get creative and try and figure out a way to retrieve these without them just falling through. Okay, and believe it or not, just having this little bit on the front here is enough for me to put some leverage on and make sure that the back of the cam stays lifted up. All right, she's out. Now let's take a look at the lobe for that one lifter we took out. All right, so I'm gonna have to straddle the tripod here a little bit. That should be good enough. So that rides on the front cam bearing. So we're gonna start here with the lobes, and as I said, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's for the next cam bearing. 5, 6, 7, 8, and oh my God, that lobe is toast. Well, whatever bit of the lobe is left. Oh my God. All right, so let's look at the lobe next to it. You see how it comes around the heel of the cam down here, up to the tip of the lobe rather, and we can see that side profile there. How it's got that the tip there basically where it tapers off. Look at that. In comparison, it's gone. It is gone. What's left of it is right here. And look at, oh my goodness. Look at that. That spot's basically flat. And that is what wiping a cam lobe is. So, even more important reason for why we kept everything organized and all the rocker arms, the push rods, the lifters in their position that they were removed from is now when I go back and inspect all the parts, I can look at everything for that number 4 cylinder exhaust valve and see if anything went wrong. If a push rod got bent, if there was an issue with a rocker arm, a spring, anything like that. So that is a perfect example of why we keep everything together. All right, what do we got here? PS 929-113 and 682S. All right, with any luck, I can find out some information on this cam. That looks like a degree mark there. I wonder if that's the lobe separation angle, 113. So I came inside the house real quick to go through the book I have here with all the receipts in it. And take a look at this. So this is the paperwork from Precision Speed when the engine build was done. And first of all, look at that date, 1982. But here is the cam, C113, and it just occurred to me that the PS on the back of the cam is Precision Speed. So This is the cam that was in it from 1982. Okay, let's take a break. Yeah, let's just take a break. No talking. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I was just reflecting on the engine build so far, and you know, at first I was just planning on ripping the rotating assembly out, going and getting it rebalanced, and hopefully just slapping everything back in and getting it back in the car. But due to some recent developments, as you've seen, it's gonna need some more work. After seeing that cam lobe, the amount of metal particles that have been getting just pumped around this engine block, as of right now, I'm additionally going to need a new camshaft, which means new lifters, and because of all that metal debris, a new oil pump, and now the block is going to have to be completely stripped and cleaned extremely well. So a couple more things to add to the list, but honestly, I can't be too surprised if this build is actually as old as it appears to be. But the good news is the rest of the bottom end seems to be okay. As we've gone through already, there's no valve marks on any of the pistons, nothing's cracked from what I've seen. From just having the block briefly upside down, the bottom end seems to be okay. So hoping that the rest of that is fine. So we'll see. So first, let's go ahead and continue where we left off and get these two lifters out, and then we'll flip the block over and start getting the bottom end out. I need to order some more parts. If anything else is wrong, I'm gonna LS swap it. All right, so now let's go ahead and get those two remaining lifters out. I'm not actually at the point of hitting it with a sledgehammer just yet. So I'm going to attempt to just tap the lifters up just enough that I can reach in and grab them. Gotcha. Okay. And there we go. So now, time to start disassembly to get everything out for the bottom end. And we're gonna start back here with the oil pump. Shorter bolt goes in the front here, towards the front of the block. Longer bolt, the higher one here, all the way at the back of the block. So from the Oldsmobile small block book that I read, it stated that there was a very small, I think, metal gasket that was going to be between the oil pump and the block, and this does not appear to have one. Also, something I forgot to show because it fell out when I turned the block over, but here's the oil pump drive shaft. Okay, now we're ready to start loosening up the rod caps here and get the rods and pistons out. I left the number one piston at top dead center, so number one and number two are pretty much in the perfect position to go ahead and start removing these. So I'm going to do these one at a time, so we'll start here with the number one cylinder. So before I pull this number one rod cap, I'm just going to take a close look. And we can see that the number one is stamped in to the side of the rod cap and the rod here, and it's actually stamped on the side that faces that cylinder. So remember, the block is upside down, but this is the number one cylinder right here. So the stamping is facing outwards towards the cylinder. You can see that follows suit here. If we go to number 2, number 2 is on this side facing the cylinder. And if we come to the next one here, number 3, again, stamped on the side facing the cylinder. So I'll verify that as I go back to make sure, but we're going to be using that as our guide. All right, so we'll take these nuts off. Don't drop them. Put those aside for right now. Get this rod cap off. Looks like the bearing is still on the crank. See if I could get that off with the magnet maybe. There we go. Yeah, that's about what I expected. You can see it's worn through the outer layer of the bearing material there. What do we have in here? Did they turn the crank? Yep, 010, so they turn the crank 10 thousandths. Before I start actually pushing this piston out of the cylinder, I'm gonna take just 2 short lengths of 3/8 tubing that I cut, and we're gonna fit these over the studs. That way they won't scrape the cylinder walls as we push it out. Should be able to get this most of the way down by hand. There we go. Okay, so I have the piston rod assembly completely out. As you can see, I reattached the rod cap and just snug them down with the nuts back on there, and I got the bearing shells back in place as well. So this is back together exactly the way it came out, and now I can put this in my box where I have each cylinder numbered so I can keep this organized as well. Something I just want to take a note of is when I took the rod cap off, the bearing shell stayed behind on the crank, which happens a lot. But once I knocked the piston out, I turned this upside down and this bearing shell fell right out. I put it back on when I was reassembling everything here, and there was actually quite a gap on each side of the bearing. So it really wasn't sitting in there snug. I know when you assemble them new, they pretty much slide right in and they sit in there really snug. But I didn't like the fact that there was a gap on each side. So I just want to take note of that and pay attention to that on the other ones as well when I take them out. But anyway, I'm going to continue removing the rest of them just like I did that one. Okay, so all the pistons have been removed. I got them stored away and organized. And as you can see, the crank has definitely seen better days, but it's not the worst that I've seen either. There's definitely a few spots here and there where my fingernail is ever so slightly getting caught. So we're gonna have to take a closer look at that in a little bit. But first, let's get these main caps off. Herp. Jeez. Okay, taking the rear ones out a different torque spec. Oh. Right. So now those are all broken loose. All of the nuts have been removed for the main cap studs, except this one actually came out, so I'll fix that in a little bit. And the rear two here are bolts. So we'll take those out, get them bagged up, and let's get the caps off. All right, so before we go pulling off the main caps, there's just a real quick thing we're gonna look at. This is very important before you go pulling your mains off. So since this has been to the machine shop already, this is very common practice. You can see here, there's a number 1 stamped in this main cap. What that means is that this is the first position from the front. So from the front of the engine, remember we're upside down, this is the front, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a stamp there with a number 1 facing forwards. So when we go to put this back together, we'll know that this goes in the first position and the number 1 faces forwards. Real quick, if you take a look, turn the crank, you can see it's on this side for this one, number 2. Behind that, number 3. Over here it's on this side, number 4, and of course number 5. That one pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get these off of here first. So we'll go ahead and remove number 1 main cap here. This one actually wasn't on there too tight. Yeah, it's about what I expected. All right, so if we take a look at the main cap, we can see the number 1 stamp here that I was talking about. And if we look at the rear side of it, side that faces the back of the engine, we can see that there is no stamp. So, as I said, this not only is a notation of which position this cap goes in, but this number also faces the front of the engine. Yikes. And just so we can take a better look, I have the main caps here with the bearings in them. This is 1 through 5, just so we can take a closer look at the bearings themselves. Yeah. Oof. It's not terrible. Let's take a closer look at this one. See that groove? Several grooves. More than enough to catch a fingernail in. So, not like we didn't know it already, but there was quite a bit of debris moving through this engine. And not bad on the back one there. Not terrible. Again, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is good. It's seen some things. Come over to the crank here. Take a look at number 1. It's one little groove there. Yeah, that number 1 bearing was not that great. Number 2 wasn't too bad. It's not terrible. Let's take a look at number 4. Oh yeah, you can see the corresponding groove. And the rear. Well, let's go ahead and lift the crank up out of here. Since I have the studs installed still, I need to be very careful to lift it straight up and not to nick any of these main journals. Probably better to, well, definitely be better to take the studs out, but here we go. All right, don't think I recommend pulling that out with the studs in. That was a little sketchy. Anyway, take a look at the other half of the bearing shells here. Yikes. And number 4. Oof. Alright guys, so before we wrap up the 403 disassembly video, there's just a few other things that we're going to talk about real quick. In case you thought I forgot, cam bearings. I didn't. They actually seem to have held up better than the rest of the bearings in the block. However, I'm still going to take care of these as well. I mean, have everything down to this point, why not? So I need to get the proper installer and removal tool for those because the one from the 350 won't work with that. So I'll take care of that in the future. Other than that, I'm probably going to pull these studs anyway, just to make sure I can get everything nice and clean. Also have to get the oil filter adapter off here, make sure that the block is clean of any gasket material. The oil pan's still here, and I'm sure there's still a little bit here and there. Other than that, some oil galley plugs in the front and rear. So I take those out so I can clean the passageways out completely because God knows this block needs it. Thankfully, it appears that the 403 has significantly fewer block plugs in it than the 350 does because my God, there were so many to knock out on a small block Chevy. So that's nice. Of course, core plugs, freeze plugs. Those are going to be coming out as well. I'll get all new ones in there, and I'm not looking forward to seeing what the coolant passageways in this block look like after seeing the water pump. So that's probably going to be a nightmare in of itself. But yeah, I figured these wouldn't be too exciting to watch me take out. So just a few small things left here and there, and then we can consider this block completely stripped and bare. That brings us to our last order of business. Plans. What am I going to be doing with this? Well, I still have a ton of measurements to make, but from what I can see, I'm definitely going to be reusing this block. First thing I'm going to be doing, aside from removing the rest of the things that I mentioned just a moment ago, I'm probably going to take this crank and I'm going to see if I can manage to polish it by hand. I did it with my other crank and a few other ones, and they came out pretty good. However, the scratches and grooves in these are pretty substantial. My fingernail does get caught in them. So I'm gonna try and clean it up and see what I get, and then I'm gonna make a decision from there. This is already ground 10 thousandths, this crankshaft. So if I decide not to run it, then I'm gonna go ahead and get it ground down another 10 thousandths. But I also have to make sure that the 20 thousandths undersized bearings are also going to be in stock, because finding some things for this 403 has proven to be a little bit difficult. So there's a lot of things to keep into account here with this build, because it is not like a small block Chevy where you can just get anything everywhere. So need to keep that in mind. Otherwise, what do we have from there? All right, the cam. I'm going to measure the cam that came out, and I want to get something as close as I can find to what was in there, because I want all the valve train parts and everything that I had just to work. I really don't feel like doing a whole entire build on this. I really just want to get this back together, have it running, happy, and driving. So that's what I'm gonna do with the cam. I'm gonna do another hydraulic flat tappet cam, which is very controversial in today's day and age, because so many people are having cam failures and wiping their cams on break-in or shortly after break-in. And I actually discussed this in detail in another one of my videos with my Camaro and its 350, because I originally wiped the cam when I did the first build on that one. And long story short, a lot of companies are using cheap junk parts from overseas, and their tolerances just are not that great. Build quality is definitely not that great. But I have a cam grinder who's here in the US and uses Johnson lifters. He grinds the cam himself and gives you exactly what you want for your setup. And the only flat tappet lifters he uses are Johnson lifters. And I believe those are the only hydraulic flat tappet lifters that are still produced in the US. So they worked extremely well for my Camaro. I had no issues with that. So I'm going to be going with that again. I don't feel like doing all the other extra things that come along with turning this into a roller setup.
It's really not too much, but with everything that we found in here together, this is basically like a 1980s time capsule of an engine build. So I really want to keep it the way it was, and I'm extremely curious to find out what kind of power it puts out and how it performs with this setup from back in the 80s, you know, with the forged crank and the early Olds heads and all the other stuff that we found in it. So really excited to see how that's going to turn out. Otherwise, you know, I'm going to have to hone the cylinders and make sure those are all prepped and ready for new piston rings. And what else do we got? I don't think there's too much. Other than that, it's going to be replacement parts and anything that just needs freshening up. I'm going to go over all the valve train parts and everything that I plan on reusing, make sure everything's fine. If anything is not fine, it will be replaced. But as I said, trying to keep it as close to the original build as possible. So I think that about wraps it up, guys. I'll take some videos of some other things along the way. Cleaning, this is all gonna get cleaned up and repainted back to the Pontiac blue and have it looking all nice when it's all done. But that should wrap this up. If you've watched this long, I'm pretty sure this is gonna be a long one. Let me just say thank you very much. And I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it was entertaining at the very least. And aside from that, I hope you learned a little something like I did. There's a bunch of things that I learned about a 403 here that I did not know being a Chevy guy. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. I'll catch you guys soon. I'm sorry it took so long to get this video up. There has been a ton going on around here, but I'm finally digging back into this, so stay tuned. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.